The city bus jolted as it climbed the hill, passengers swaying with every turn. Near the back, the Mafia boss, Dario Venturi, sat quietly in a black coat, blending in with the crowd. He was heading to a meeting he couldn't afford to miss. But then he noticed her, a little girl, no older than 7, sitting alone in a pink dress, knees pulled to her chest, one shoe missing, hands shaking as she stared at the floor. Something in the way she kept glancing at the window, like she was searching for someone or hiding from someone, made Dario's instincts sharpen. He'd grown up reading danger long before he could read words. He shifted his gaze. That's when he saw it. A bruise peeking from beneath her sleeve. Fresh, purple, finger-shaped. His jaw tightened. The bus hit a pothole and she flinched, not from the bump, but from a man sitting 2 rows behind her. Dario watched the man's reflection in the window. Cold stare, fixed on the girl. Predatory. When the girl realized Dario was looking at her, she hesitated, then slowly walked toward him, gripping the seatbacks for balance. She leaned close, voice trembling so softly only he could hear. "Please, help me." 3 words. 3 words that made one of the most feared mafia bosses in the city go completely still, because her next breath wasn't a whisper. It was a warning. "He's taking me when the bus stops." Dario didn't turn, didn't look back. He didn't need to. His hand slid into his coat. His eyes darkened. The meeting could wait. Saving this girl couldn't. Stay with me until the end, because what happens when the bus finally stops will reveal a truth neither the girl nor the mafia boss was ready for. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Dario Venturi had built his empire on reading people. In his world, one wrong judgment meant a bullet between the eyes. He could spot a liar from across a crowded restaurant, smell fear from 3 blocks away, and identify a threat before it even knew it was dangerous. These weren't skills you learned in business school. They were survival instincts carved into his bones by 23 years of living in the shadows. But this little girl, sitting 2 feet away from him, she was something else entirely. Her name was Sofia, though Dario wouldn't learn that for another 15 minutes. Right now, she was just a trembling child in a torn pink dress, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. The rabbit was missing an eye, its fur matted and stained. In any other circumstance, Dario might have looked past her. Children weren't his business. He dealt with grown men who made grown choices and faced grown consequences. This was different. The bruises told a story he recognized all too well. Dario's own childhood had been written in similar marks. His father's hands, heavy with liquor and rage, had left their signature across his back more times than he could count. The difference was, Dario had grown up to become the monster his father never imagined. This girl, she was still small, still breakable, still worth saving. The man 2 rows behind shifted in his seat. Dario caught the movement in his peripheral vision. Tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a cheap gray jacket that didn't fit right. His hair was greasy, combed back in a way that made his forehead look too large for his face. But it was his eyes that gave him away. They never left the girl, not even when other passengers moved between them. Dario had seen that look before. It was the look of a predator who had already chosen his prey. The bus rumbled down 5th Street, past the old cathedral with its broken stained glass windows, past the pawn shops and check-cashing stores that marked the boundary between decent neighborhoods and the places where decent people didn't go after dark. Each stop brought new passengers, but the man in gray never moved. Neither did Sofia. She stayed pressed against the window, her small fingers leaving smudges on the glass as she searched the passing streets. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Dario asked, keeping his voice gentle. In his line of work, he'd learned that tone mattered more than words. You could threaten someone with a whisper or comfort them with a growl, depending on how you shaped the sounds. Sofia looked up at him with eyes too old for her face. "Sofia Morales," she said, barely audible above the engine noise. "That's a beautiful name." I'm Dario. He paused, studying her face. Sophia, that man behind us, do you know him? Her entire body tensed. She shook her head quickly, but her eyes said something different. They darted toward the man, then back to Dario, filled with a terror that made his chest tighten. He's been following you, hasn't he? This time she nodded. Just barely, but it was enough. Dario's hand moved inside his coat, fingers brushing against the cold metal of his Beretta. He'd carried the same gun for 8 years, ever since the night he'd taken control of the Venturi family from his predecessor. It had never failed him. But using it on a city bus, surrounded by innocent passengers, would create more problems than it solved. He needed to be smart about this. The bus wheezed to a stop at Maple Avenue. A few passengers got off, but the man in gray stayed put. So did Sophia. She was waiting for something, or someone was waiting for her. Either way, time was running out. Sophia, Dario said, leaning closer so only she could hear. I need you to listen to me very carefully. When I tell you to move, you're going to walk to the front of the bus and sit right behind the driver. Can you do that? She nodded again, clutching her rabbit tighter. Good girl. And if anyone tries to stop you, you scream as loud as you can. Understood? Yes, sir. The bus lurched forward again, heading deeper into the industrial district where the buildings grew taller and the shadows grew longer. This was familiar territory for Dario. Half the warehouses in this area paid tribute to his organization. The other half would, eventually. But familiarity bred confidence, and confidence could be dangerous. The man in gray was counting on that. He'd chosen this route for a reason, just like he'd chosen Sophia for a reason. Predators always had reasons. Dario's phone buzzed. A text from his lieutenant, Marco. Boss, where are you? Torino's getting impatient. Vincent Torino. The meeting that had brought Dario onto this bus in the first place. Torino controlled the docks, and his cooperation was essential for the shipment arriving Thursday night. Miss this meeting, and 3 months of negotiations would crumble. Torino didn't give second chances. But as Dario looked at Sophia's frightened face, he realized some things mattered more than business deals. He typed back, handle it. Something came up. Marco's response was immediate. Boss, this isn't... Dario turned off the phone. The man in gray was checking his watch now, anxiety creeping into his posture. Whatever he had planned, it was tied to a schedule. That meant accomplices. That meant this was bigger than one sick individual preying on a child. Sophia, Dario whispered. How long has he been following you? 3 days, she said, so quietly he almost missed it. He was outside my school on Monday. Then yesterday at the playground. Mama thought I was making it up. 3 days of stalking. 3 days of planning. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated abduction. And Sophia was walking into it with no one to protect her except a mafia boss who had more blood on his hands than years in his life. The irony wasn't lost on him. Dario Venturi, a man who'd ordered executions over breakfast and discussed body disposal over dinner, was about to risk everything to save a 7-year-old girl he'd never met. But as the bus turned onto Industrial Boulevard and the man in gray reached into his jacket, Dario realized this moment would define more than just Sophia's future. It would define his soul. The bus shuddered as it approached the next stop. Dario felt the familiar weight of his Beretta against his ribs. But something told him bullets wouldn't solve this problem. Not cleanly. Not without innocent blood spilling across dirty bus seats. He'd built his reputation on violence, yes, but strategic violence. Calculated moves that sent messages without creating chaos. This situation required a different kind of precision. Sophia's breathing had become shallow, rapid. Her knuckles were white around the stuffed rabbit's remaining ear. The man in gray had moved closer, now just 1 row behind them. Close enough that Dario could smell his cologne. Cheap, cloying, the kind of scent that tried too hard to mask something rotten underneath. Sophia, look at me, Dario whispered. Her dark eyes met his, swimming with unshed tears. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be brave when you answer. Can you do that? She nodded, though her bottom lip trembled. Who is he? The question hung in the stale bus air like smoke. Sophia's gaze darted past Dario's shoulder, then back to his face. When she spoke, her words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for days. His name is Mr. Peterson. He works at my school. He said my mama was in the hospital, and he was supposed to pick me up. But I saw Mama this morning. She made me breakfast. She's not sick. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. A school employee. Someone with access, with authority, with the perfect cover to explain why a 7-year-old would trust him. Someone who'd spent days studying Sophia's routine, learning her schedule, identifying the perfect moment to strike. Dario's jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. In his world, men who hurt children faced consequences that made their victims' nightmares look like fairy tales. But this wasn't his world. This was a city bus filled with commuters heading home from work, completely unaware that a predator was hunting in their midst. The bus wheezed to a stop. More passengers shuffled off, their faces buried in phones, lost in their own problems. The evening crowd was thinning. Soon, there would be nowhere for Sophia to hide in the dwindling sea of bodies. Peterson stood up. Dario's muscles coiled like springs. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to end this threat the way he'd ended dozens of others. But Sophia was watching him, trusting him, believing that this stranger in a black coat could somehow keep the monster at bay. He couldn't disappoint her, not when she reminded him so much of the child he'd once been. Small, afraid, praying for someone, anyone, to step between him and the violence that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Excuse me, Sophia." Peterson's voice was honey smooth, practiced. "Your mother sent me to pick you up. She's waiting at home." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily it was clearly rehearsed. How many times had he used these exact words? How many children had fallen for this same script? Sophia pressed closer to Dario, her small body shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. She didn't answer Peterson, didn't even look at him. Smart girl. She'd learned to trust her instincts, just like Dario had at her age. "Sophia, honey, we need to go now. Your mother is worried sick." Peterson's tone remained calm, but Dario caught the edge creeping in. The facade was starting to crack. That's when Dario made his choice. He stood up slowly, his 6'3" frame unfolding like a switchblade. When he turned to face Peterson, his expression was carved from granite. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Dario said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that had made grown men confess their sins before he'd even asked a question. Peterson blinked, clearly caught off guard. He'd been expecting compliance, maybe some confusion, but not resistance. Certainly not from someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a mob movie. "I'm sorry, but this doesn't concern you," Peterson stammered, his confidence wavering. "Sophia, come on. Your mother specifically asked me to." "Her mother is at home making dinner," Dario interrupted, the words cutting through Peterson's lies like a blade through silk. "She's not in any hospital. She didn't send you, and Sophia isn't going anywhere with you." The bus had gone quiet. Other passengers were beginning to notice the tension, heads turning toward the confrontation brewing in the back rows. An elderly woman clutched her purse tighter. A businessman in a wrinkled suit pretended to read his newspaper while straining to hear every word. Peterson's face flushed red. The mask was slipping, revealing something ugly underneath. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I know exactly what I'm doing," Dario said, taking a step closer. "The question is, do you?" It was a threat wrapped in silk. The kind of warning Dario had perfected over years of negotiations where the wrong answer meant a shallow grave in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Peterson might not understand the language of organized crime, but he understood danger when it was standing 3 feet away, dressed in Italian wool and radiating menace. The bus driver glanced in his rearview mirror, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Traffic was heavy on Industrial Boulevard, cars crawling toward the highway in the dying light of evening. They were trapped in this metal box with a predator, and everyone was beginning to realize it. Sophia tugged on Dario's coat. When he looked down, she whispered something that made his blood run cold. "He has pictures of other kids in his wallet. I saw them when he was buying candy at the school store." Other kids. This wasn't Peterson's first hunt. Sophia was just the latest target in what was probably a long, horrifying pattern. How many children had already fallen into this monster's web? How many families were still searching, still hoping, still clinging to the possibility that their missing child might somehow find their way home? Dario's phone buzzed again. Another text from Marco, probably wondering why his boss had vanished in the middle of the most important business deal of the year. But as Dario looked at Sophia's terrified face, he realized that some battles were worth fighting even when victory came at an impossible price. The bus lurched forward again, carrying them deeper into the industrial district, where warehouses cast long shadows and security cameras had convenient blind spots. Peterson was getting nervous, checking his watch every few seconds, his carefully constructed plan falling apart in real time. That's when Dario understood the true scope of what they were facing. Peterson wasn't working alone. Someone was waiting at the next stop, ready to help complete the abduction. This was an organized operation, not the desperate gamble of a lone predator, which meant Sophia's nightmare was just beginning. The next stop was Warehouse District Station. Dario knew this area like the back of his scarred hands. 3 of his front businesses operated within a 2-block radius. The loading docks, the shipping containers that arrived every Tuesday, carrying more than industrial equipment. The abandoned textile factory where problems got permanently solved. If Peterson had backup waiting, they'd chosen their hunting ground well. This wasn't a neighborhood where screams drew attention. It was a place where people minded their own business and asked no questions. The bus hissed to a halt. Through the grimy windows, Dario spotted them immediately. 2 men in dark clothing standing near the bus stop, trying too hard to look casual. One was checking his phone every few seconds. The other kept glancing at his watch. They weren't waiting for public transportation. Sophia saw them too. Her grip on the stuffed rabbit tightened until her knuckles went white. A small whimper escaped her lips, barely audible above the diesel engine's rumble. Peterson's confidence returned like a switch being flipped. He straightened his shoulders, smoothed his greasy hair, and smiled. It was the kind of smile that belonged in nightmares. "Time to go, Sophia," he said, reaching for her arm. Dario moved faster than Peterson's reflexes could process. His hand clamped down on Peterson's wrist with the crushing force of a steel vise. The school employee let out a sharp yelp of pain, his fingers going numb instantly. "I don't think so," Dario said, his voice dropping to the deadly whisper that had preceded the last words dozens of men had ever heard. Peterson tried to pull away, but Dario's grip was unbreakable. In his younger days, those hands had strangled the life out of Vincent Calabresi, a rival family's enforcer who'd made the mistake of targeting Dario's sister. Now they held Peterson's fate with the same casual indifference. "Let me go, you psycho!" Peterson hissed, panic bleeding into his voice. "I'm calling the police!" Dario almost laughed. The police. Peterson had no idea who he was dealing with. Half the precinct's detective division owed favors to the Venturi family. The other half knew better than to ask questions when certain names came up in incident reports. "By all means, make that call," Dario said, tightening his grip until Peterson's face went pale. "Tell them Dario Venturi is detaining a child predator on the number 12 bus. See how fast they prioritize your complaint." The color drained from Peterson's face completely. Even civilians had heard whispers of that name. Stories told in hushed voices about the man who'd united 3 warring crime families under one brutal banner. The ghost who walked through rival territories untouched, because everyone understood the consequences of raising a hand against him. Peterson's backup noticed something was wrong. The 2 men outside began moving toward the bus doors, their casual pretense abandoned. One reached inside his jacket. The other spoke rapidly into a cell phone. Dario assessed the situation with the cold calculation that had kept him alive in a business where most men died young. 3 armed men, 1 7-year-old witness, a bus full of innocent passengers who didn't deserve to become collateral damage. The odds were challenging, but far from impossible. He'd survived worse. "Sophia, remember what I told you about moving to the front of the bus?" Dario asked, never taking his eyes off Peterson. She nodded, clutching her rabbit like a talisman. "Do it now. Quietly. Don't run. Just walk." Sophia slipped out of her seat and began making her way toward the driver, her small feet silent on the rubber floor. The other passengers were too absorbed in their phones and newspapers to notice the deadly drama unfolding in the back rows. Peterson watched her go, desperation replacing fear in his eyes. "You don't understand. These people don't negotiate. If I don't deliver her, they'll kill me." "They?" Dario's interest sharpened. This was bigger than he'd realized. Peterson wasn't the monster. He was just another victim, trapped in a web spun by someone with real power. The organization. They have contracts, orders from overseas. This girl, she's not random, she's specific. They've been tracking her family for months. The words hit Dario like ice water. This wasn't about one sick individual preying on children. This was human trafficking. International. Organized. The kind of operation that moved children across borders like cargo, erasing them from existence with ruthless efficiency. Sofia Morales wasn't just in danger. She was the target of professional kidnappers who treated human lives like inventory. Outside, the 2 men had reached the bus doors. The driver, oblivious to the threat, was preparing to open them for new passengers. Once those doors opened, Peterson's backup would board, and the situation would spiral beyond Dario's control. He had maybe 30 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether Sophia lived or disappeared into a nightmare that would make her current terror look like a pleasant dream. Peterson sensed the shift in Dario's attention. "Look, we can make a deal here. You let me go, I walk away, and nobody gets hurt. My people outside, they're just following orders. This doesn't have to get messy." Dario studied Peterson's face, reading the micro-expressions that revealed truth from lies. Fear was genuine. Desperation was real. But the offer? Pure manipulation. Peterson was buying time, hoping his backup would board the bus before Dario could act. "Who's paying you?" Dario asked. "I can't tell you that. They'll kill my family. I'll kill you right here if you don't start talking." Peterson's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Eastern, Europeans, Russians, maybe Ukrainians. They operate out of the port district. Ship containers, legitimate businesses as fronts, but they move other things too. Things that don't appear on manifests. The port district." Dario's mind raced through the implications. That was Vincent Torino's territory. The meeting he'd abandoned to save Sophia. The shipping connections that formed the backbone of their planned partnership. Was Torino involved? Had Dario walked into something larger than a simple business arrangement? The bus doors hissed open. Peterson's backup stepped aboard, their eyes immediately scanning for their target. When they spotted Peterson still trapped in Dario's grip, their hands moved toward concealed weapons. Sophia had reached the front of the bus, but she was still trapped inside a metal box with armed predators. The driver remained oblivious, counting change and checking his route schedule. Dario made his choice. He released Peterson's wrist and stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. To the casual observer, he looked like just another passenger preparing to exit at his stop. But Sophia saw something different in his eyes, a cold promise that made her stop trembling for the first time since boarding the bus. The hunt was about to become a war. The first man stepped onto the bus, his eyes scanning the rows like a predator counting sheep. He was built like a prizefighter, thick neck, broad shoulders, hands that had clearly done more than shake other hands in greeting. His partner followed, smaller but more dangerous, the kind of wiry frame that moved like a switchblade through a crowd. Dario felt the familiar calm that settled over him before violence erupted. Time seemed to slow, details sharpening with crystalline clarity. The elderly woman 3 rows up, clutching her purse. The businessman pretending to read while his hands shook. The bus driver, still oblivious, humming some tune from the radio. And Sophia, pressed against the front window, her dark eyes wide with terror as she watched the nightmare unfold behind her. Peterson was sweating now, his confidence evaporating as he realized his rescue might cost him more than his life. Listen, they don't know you're involved yet. You can still walk away from this. Just let me handle the girl. And everyone goes home safe. Dario's laugh was soft, barely audible, but it carried the weight of 23 years in a business where walking away wasn't an option. You still don't understand, do you? The first man was moving down the aisle now, his eyes locked on Peterson. When he spoke, his accent was thick, Eastern European, exactly as Peterson had described. We have problem? Peterson straightened, trying to project authority he didn't possess. No problem. Just a misunderstanding with another passenger. The package is ready for delivery. Package. They were talking about Sophia like she was cargo, something to be loaded and shipped and forgotten. Dario's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. Then why is package at front of bus? The second man asked, nodding toward Sophia's trembling form near the driver. Peterson's face went white. He'd lost control of the situation, and everyone knew it. In organizations like this, losing control meant losing everything, including your life. Dario stood slowly, his movement drawing both men's attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The girl stays where she is. The first man's hand moved inside his jacket. Who are you to interfere with our business? Someone who's about to make it very personal. The tension in the bus reached a breaking point. Other passengers were beginning to notice the confrontation. Heads turning, whispered conversations starting. A mother pulled her teenage son closer. An old man fumbled for his cell phone. Peterson saw his opportunity. With Dario's attention focused on the two newcomers, he lunged toward the front of the bus, reaching for Sophia with desperate fingers. He never made it. Dario's hand shot out, grabbing Peterson by the collar and yanking him backward with enough force to slam him into the nearest seat. The impact drove the air from Peterson's lungs in a sharp gasp that echoed through the bus. Both men reached for their weapons simultaneously. But Dario had been expecting this moment, planning for it, reading the micro-expressions that telegraphed their intentions before they'd fully formed the thoughts themselves. His Beretta appeared in his hand like magic. The barrel pointed directly at the first man's chest. The draw was so smooth, so practiced, that it seemed to happen in slow motion. I wouldn't, Dario said, his voice never rising above conversational level. The bus driver finally noticed something was wrong. His eyes found the rearview mirror, caught sight of the gun, and his face went pale as fresh snow. Oh, Jesus! Oh, sweet Jesus! Keep driving, Dario ordered without taking his eyes off the two men. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't even think about reaching for that radio. The driver nodded frantically, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles cracked. Sophia had turned around now, watching the confrontation with the wide-eyed fascination of a child who'd seen too much violence in her short life. But instead of fear, Dario saw something else in her expression. Recognition, understanding. She knew exactly what kind of man was protecting her. The first man slowly raised his hands, his weapon still holstered. You make big mistake, friend. This is not your business. It became my business the moment you stepped onto this bus, Dario replied. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around, walk back to those doors, and get off at the next stop. You're going to forget this girl exists. You're going to forget you ever saw her. The second man spoke up, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. You think gun makes you safe? You think we are only two? This organization has reach you cannot imagine. Dario's smile was colder than a January morgue. Your organization. Tell me about it. Peterson, still gasping for breath, tried to speak. Don't tell him anything. They'll kill us all. They're going to kill you anyway, Dario said without looking at Peterson. The moment you failed to deliver the girl, you became a liability. Men like these don't leave loose ends. The truth of those words hit Peterson like a physical blow. His face crumpled as he realized he'd been played from the beginning. A disposable asset, useful only as long as he could produce results. But I have another proposition, Dario continued, his attention returning to the two men. You tell me who's running this operation, and I'll let you walk off this bus breathing. The first man laughed, but it sounded forced. You are one man with one gun. We are army. I'm not just one man, Dario said, pulling out his phone with his free hand. Marco, it's me. I need a cleanup crew at Warehouse District Station. Full package. Bring the heavy equipment. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. That was my lieutenant. In about 15 minutes, this entire district is going to be crawling with my people, armed, motivated, and very, very unhappy about anyone who threatens children. The color drained from both men's faces. They were street soldiers, not strategists. They'd come prepared for a simple snatch-and-grab operation, not a war with one of the city's most powerful crime families. Peterson was crying now, soft sobs that shook his entire body. I never wanted this. They said it was just one time. One girl, and then I could walk away. There's never just one time, Dario said, his voice gentle for the first time since the confrontation began. Men like these, they own you the moment you say yes. They own your family, your future, your soul. The bus was approaching another stop. Through the windows, Dario could see the familiar silhouettes of his territory, buildings he controlled, streets where his word was law, home field advantage. The first man seemed to sense the shift in power dynamics. Perhaps we can negotiate, businessman to businessman. I don't negotiate with people who hurt children, Dario replied. I eliminate them. Sophia's small voice cut through the tension like a knife. Mr. Dario? He glanced toward her, keeping the gun trained on his targets. Yes, sweetheart. There are more children. In the pictures he showed me, they looked scared. The words hit Dario like a sledgehammer to the chest. More children. How many families were searching for missing sons and daughters? How many Sofia Morales were out there, trapped in nightmares they couldn't escape? His finger tightened on the trigger. The second man saw death in Dario's eyes and began talking rapidly. Container ship, Pier 17. They arrive Thursday nights. The children, they are processed at the old fish cannery, 3 blocks from the port. Names, Dario demanded. Kozlov. Dmitry Kozlov runs the operation, but he answers to someone higher. Someone we never see. The bus shuddered to a halt at the next stop. Outside, Dario could see 3 black SUVs pulling up to the curb. His people, right on time. The cavalry had arrived, but as Dario watched his men emerge from the vehicles, he realized this was just the beginning. Sofia was safe, for now. Peterson and his accomplices would face justice one way or another, but somewhere in the darkness of the port district, other children were waiting for rescue. And Dario Venturi, a man who'd built his empire on violence and fear, was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous wars were the ones fought for redemption, passion. 3 weeks later, Sofia Morales sat in a sunlit classroom, her hand raised high to answer a question about fractions. The bruises had faded. The nightmares were becoming less frequent. Her mother had cried for hours when the police brought her home that night. Holding her so tight, Sofia thought she might never breathe again. The old fish cannery had been raided that same Thursday night. 17 children were found locked in shipping containers, ranging in age from 5 to 14. 17 families got their children back. 17 futures were saved because a little girl had whispered 3 words to a stranger on a bus. Peterson never made it to trial. Neither did his accomplices. Some problems, Dario had learned long ago, were better solved permanently than processed through a system that might fail. Dmitry Kozlov's operation crumbled within a month. His network, built on fear and silence, couldn't survive the kind of pressure the Venturi family applied when children were involved. The Port District became a very dangerous place for anyone in the trafficking business. Dario still rode the city buses sometimes, watching faces, reading the stories written in posture and glances. He'd missed that meeting with Vincent Torino, but discovered something worth more than any business deal. Sometimes the monsters we become can be redeemed by the children we save. Sophia never knew her protector's real name. To her, he was just the man in the black coat who listened when she whispered for help. But every morning when she walked to school, safe and whole, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes angels wear darkness, and sometimes the most feared men in the city are exactly who you need when the world tries to steal your light. That's the power of 3 words. Help me. 2 syllables that changed everything for a mafia boss who discovered his soul wasn't as lost as he'd believed. What would you have done on that bus? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories that prove heroes come in the most unexpected forms.